temperature, your mental, what's the difference? Your spiritual, what's the difference? Mental, emotional, and spiritual are quite subtle. And they get defined differently by different people on different days. So there's a lot of variation in what people think about it. And we're also looking at wellness. And so we're looking at a very big spectrum. And the spectrum of emotional wellness, because emotions go all the way from very pleasant to very unpleasant. Wellness may or may not be somewhere in the middle, or on one side or another side, depending on how you look at it. And then mental, we will perhaps say that you could distinguish between mental and emotional by saying that mental is about how you think and emotional is about how you feel. But it's not necessarily like that, but we can say it's like that for the time being. And then spiritual is much more subtle. And that is something that you discern better with more experience in spiritual practice, which not that many people have. So most people are more aware about their emotional state, their mental state. And then we take a look at how the medical profession thinks about this, because there are things called mental illness. I don't know if you can have emotional illness. Nobody ever talks about emotional illness, do they? Or do they? I haven't heard about it. Yeah. But actually, all your emotions are experienced in your mind. So if you have a mental illness, you might also have an emotional illness. But, you know, these things are defined by the medical profession, who does not take into consideration the spiritual aspect. Because the spiritual aspect has to do with your soul. And generally speaking, they will say that your behavior and your perception of yourself and other people is a factor of your brain function. So it's a chemical question. And so then they will adjust your well-being by putting different chemicals into you. And then there's a lot of people who like the effect of chemicals, and then they will take different chemicals to have altered state of consciousness. And so in terms of chemical products, what you call as psychotropic drugs, you get some to make you less depressed, means bring you up. And then you get some to make you less manic, that is, bring you down. So all of this is done with chemical adjustments, assuming that a person is a biological, chemical, physical organism, which goes out of control from time to time. And so this is how some people look at it. But when you start to put mental, emotional, and spiritual in the same sentence, then you have to look at it a little bit differently. Because here we're talking about primarily the soul, the spirit. And the soul is defined as having a mind. So that if the mind is not well, that means the soul is not well. And feelings are experienced in the mind. So if the mind is not well and the feelings are up and down, that means it's a spiritual question. However, the soul and the body are together. And the soul is not able to do anything without the body, and the body is not able to register anything without the soul. So we have to look at mental, emotional, and spiritual wellness in the context of the embodied soul, who is in the context of family, society, and the human world. Okay, so let's look at some of these spectrums, the spectrum of emotions. So there are many emotions, like, for example, in the spiritual practice of Raj Yoga, people talk about greed, anger, lust, attachment, ego, right? And so to me, these are emotions, right? Suppose you feel angry. Someone will say, you have some anger going on. And you will say, yeah, I have some anger going on. I feel angry. And my angry feelings are raising angry thoughts. Because there is someone or something or some event that I'm angry about. So then I would direct my angry thoughts to that person, circumstance, or thing. And there will be an antagonistic relationship. And as the thoughts are amplified, and the feeling of anger gets amplified when the thoughts get amplified, and then there is a natural tendency for feelings to turn into thoughts to bring about actions, you see. Because you can't do an action unless you've had a thought, and you can't have a thought unless you had a feeling. So it starts with emotion, could be gross, could be subtle, could be bad, could be good, which provokes thinking. So it's a mental activity to think. And that's a kind of self-talk. So you have this conversation with yourself or whomever you're angry with in your mind, and then you psych yourself up to do something about it, which is generally regrettable. And so therefore there may be a few little devices that you use if this is a recurring incident or type of incident. And some people, they believe that your response to something that provokes you to anger is better if it's delayed. So somebody sends you a very unpleasant email. Have you experienced that? An unpleasant email, which will quite possibly provoke an angry feeling. And then you will create an angry verbal response to this anger-provoking email, right? And then you will say to yourself, okay, now my personal ethical policy is I will not press the send button until tomorrow, when I have come down from my high temperature emotion of anger. And when I'm a bit cooler, I'll read my response and see how I feel about that. And if I still feel the same, I can press the send button, or I might decide to be more diplomatic, or I might think that there may be some consequences that are unwanted. So I may rewrite the email having calmed down. And this is normal. But you see, it engages the emotions and the mind, and all of these things are going on in the soul. And so you can also look at it with other emotions, which may be positive emotions. So still with the email or some text, because people communicate this way quite a lot. Somebody sends you a very pleasant message. You said happy birthday to someone, so somebody's got a birthday, right, Brother Harsha? Whose birthday is it? Brother Thor. Thor. Oh, happy birthday, Thor. Didn't know it was your birthday. Good. Okay. I saw his face was there. Yeah. So happy birthday means you have good wishes. Birthday is a good occasion in which to send some nice little icons and some nice messages. And you receive a nice message, pictures of flowers, picture of birthday cake, all the stuff. And then you respond, oh, that is so nice of you, and da, 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 da. And you don't feel the trigger inside that says, watch out with your response to this, because it might be regrettable. No, you don't feel that way. They send something nice to me, I send something nice to them, that's okay. Emotion feels good, mental feels good, soul is all right, it's okay. So we're dealing really with how we respond to things that we consider to be positive or negative. And any kind of perception that you have in the material world can be called a sense perception. So you're looking at something, see something, that's a visual perception. So you can see things that correspond to your internal criteria as to what's pleasant, unpleasant, tasteful, tasteless, nice, nasty, etc. And so you will receive that in your mind with a load on it that's positive or negative. And then it will go to your understanding, because we're not actually dealing only with the emotional, the mental, and the spiritual, but we're also dealing with the intelligence. So that means I think we need to add to this the idea of intelligence health. I don't know if anybody's ever thought about whether your intelligence was healthy or sick, but I think that you can. And one of the ways that I distinguish between a healthy and a sick intelligence is whether when you are considering something, you are being logical, consistent, coherent, or illogical, inconsistent, incoherent, and you arrive at conclusions that are not valid using premises that are not true. That would be, in my view, unhealthy intelligence. And so, according to various criteria, various background situations or historical situations, your intelligence itself may be skewed one way or another. So I think we do have to consider whether our capacity to deal with ideas is in order or not. Right? What do you think? Hold on. Question after a minute or two. I just want to lay out everything first. So now, spiritual well-being. So everybody actually is an embodied soul, an embodied spirit. And the spirit is described and defined as the animating force. So your intelligence is in your soul, your mind is in your soul, your feelings are in your soul, and they are all registered in your body. And that's an interesting kind of chemical example that I quite often use. You might have heard it already before. And that is, if you see or hear or come to know of something which makes you very sad or which distresses you very much to the point where it makes you cry, those tears will be salty. As a chemical consequence of thought and feeling. And on the other hand, you may be enjoying some time with some people and someone's really funny and you start laughing and you're having a great time, you're really happy, and you may cry with happiness, and those tears will be sweet. It's also chemical. So your body produces salty tears or sweet tears depending on whether it's a very distressing provocation of the tears or a very pleasant or amusing or wonderful provocation. So the body does respond to the quality of the emotion and the kind of feelings that you have, the kind of state of mind that you have. And so the body and the soul are very much in a symbiotic relationship. And because of that, the medical profession will look at the signs of life and call it life. But in spirituality, we distinguish between life itself and signs of life. So the usual vital signs are, do you have a pulse? Are you breathing? If so, you're alive. If not, you're dead. Because they cannot see the soul arriving or leaving a body because it's not material. And if a person is doing some mental work, then they will check your ECG or something like this. And they will detect that if you think of one type of thing, your ECG is a certain way. And if they think of something else, it's another way. And so they will conclude that the brain does the thinking and that they will actually be able to poke around in different bits of the brain and see that this bit is connected with speech and this bit is connected with language and this bit is connected with memory and so on and so forth. And so it is common to consider all of these signs on the body as being the thing itself. But in spirituality, we say, no, these are signs of something non-material. And non-material things cannot be detected by physical instruments, nor can they be perceived by sense perception. So what we need to do when we're thinking about physical, mental, and spiritual health is to learn, I think, quite a lot more about yourself as a soul and how circumstances affect you, the soul, and via the body. And then the next matter arises is, what is the relevance of the practice of meditation? Because it does make a difference. So meditation, in my view, among many, many different things, you can look at meditation in many different ways. It's not a technique by any means, but it is a practice where you have to study the processes and the way the soul works, the way the mind works, the way emotions operate, how this interfaces with the body, what it does to the consciousness, the subconsciousness, what kind of distortions occur, and especially the usefulness of meditation is to bring things back to a state of harmony. So when there is some negative experience, a negative occurrence that is perceived by the person, the soul, through the body, then it creates a wound, it creates damage, it creates distortions in the soul, and it causes certain types of behavior patterns that other people identify as bad, and then they castigate you for it because they don't understand too much. It's the way it is. But because these things are very widespread, people want to unravel the mystery of how come this is like this and what's going on, and because when a person is negatively affected by negative things, then there are negative consequences that are exhibited, and these negative consequences get classified as emotional ill health or mental ill health or spiritual ill health by various people who may or may not know what they're talking about. But it becomes how people talk about these things in a common way. And it varies from time period to time period because there are different fashions that change more or less about every 30 years, more or less. And then there are some cultures which deny the existence of these things at all, and some cultures which are very sensitive to them and understand very well. So there's a cultural dimension as well as a need for information and education. So we will say that each and every one of us has experienced quite a lot of things in the whole spectrum, very nice, very bad, right? And the very nice things are not particularly bothersome. They're okay. And the reason why they're okay is because the essential characteristics of the soul are very pure, very positive, and very full of inner power, you can say. So some pleasant experience corresponds to the essence of the soul, but unpleasant experiences don't. And so therefore there is a dissonance between your experience and your soul. And this constitutes a wound. And then the question arises, can I heal from it? Can I restore myself to my original condition? What sort of damage happens? And how can I tell if I'm mentally, emotionally, spiritually unwell or well? And if so, to what degree? And can anything be done about it? If so, what and by whom? And are there any experts? These kinds of questions definitely will arise. And I think because these things are very, very subtle, at a certain part of the spectrum. It is the area covered by psychotherapy and the use of psychotropic drugs and different variety, many types of therapies are done and applied. And some of them are quite beneficial and some of them are pretty harmful, but they're applied anyway. It depends who's more famous about what. And so it's tricky. Now, some people, they have had very extreme traumatic experiences, or one of the things that is quite damaging for a person and which produces what I was talking about earlier as the unhealthy intelligence in terms of incoherent, illogical, inconsistent thinking or processing of whatever it is that you perceived. And this is because of the way a person develops from birth until they're adult, you can say. And the thing that is most troubling is when there is when you are in a dysfunctional family or a dysfunctional social setting, because this creates anxiety. And when you experience anxiety in the social setting, you may not necessarily know what is producing it. If you are a child in a family where the parents are not treating each other well, you will experience anxiety without knowing what's going on between your parents. You'll feel it. If you grow up in a family where one or both of your parents are handicapped or ill, and they will not be able to take care of you as you require, this will create anxiety. It will create confusion. And you won't necessarily be able to process what's going on because you're too small. If there is a lot of violence, this creates a great deal of anxiety. Because a child needs to have love, a structure, and feeling of security. So if you have no love, no structure, and no feeling of security, then you might as well be on a battlefield being shot at by all kinds of horrible, weapons. And you may be experiencing what people experience when they are tortured. There may be neglect. There may be all sorts of things that as a child you think is normal because that's what it is, and yet it isn't. But you don't have any reference points necessarily. And so all of this goes in a very young age because you have no barriers against it. And all of this, people will say, okay, why is it like that? And then there are different answers you could give to that. And some of them are because of what happens between people individually and collectively due to historical activities like war and colonialism and natural disasters and poverty and many things which affect whole communities. And so it builds up. And these are things which stay in the soul and which gradually amplify over a long period of time. And so I think that why people are so concerned about these type of subjects is because there are so many people who feel the effects, but they don't know what exactly these are effects of. And they don't know exactly, because it's so invisible. If somebody cuts your skin, you have a perfectly visible piece of blood coming out and a perfectly visible, gash in the skin. And then you put a perfectly good Band-Aid on it or some stitches, but you can't do that with the soul because it's not visible. But yet it gets a lot of wounds. And so I think one thing that meditation is very helpful for is it intensifies your sensitivity to things that are invisible. And so that is a good thing. Now, in the spectrum that I've been talking about, it's necessary to put some kind of delimitations or lines to distinguish between what can be repaired with simple, basic knowledge of meditation. Simple, basic. Most people have ultra simple, ultra basic knowledge of meditation, which is hardly anything, but it's something. And so if your troubles are slight, a slight amount of knowledge of meditation can be very helpful. And nowadays you find many people going to their medical practitioner with various problems like sleeplessness or mysterious anxiety or various things. And if they are given tranquilizers or what do you call different varieties of uppers and downers, they could get addicted quite easily. And that would be an additional problem because then you have to get unaddicted, which is very difficult. And so a lot of people say, you should do meditation. And meditation is then considered as some kind of repetitive behavior which makes you feel better, basically. Actually, that's not meditation, but a lot of people do repetitive things which make them feel better, because when you do something repetitive, it does something to you in the sense of it counteracts the kind of sort of explosiveness that goes on in your mind, and it kind of says you can calm down. So, people knit, people draw, people paint, people, make designs in the sand, they go for walks, they do all kinds of things which are calming. And then they will, some people will call that meditation. And on some level it is. And it's helpful. And then meditation goes all the way up. There's a whole spectrum of meditation, all the way up to a level of meditation which can actually, along with much spiritual information, can actually enable you to return back to your original harmonious, pure, peaceful, powerful, loveful, happy state of being. And for that, you need to have a lot of information. And you also need to have a connection with God or the divine, because this source is the only source of something which hasn't been contaminated. You see, you may go to the ocean for some peace, but it has been contaminated. You may watch a beautiful sunset, but the atmosphere, the air, everything has been contaminated. You may feel wonderful when you see a beautiful flower that has emerged and is in its perfect state, but it's very, very temporary. And so you need to have a source which hasn't been contaminated, which is stable, steady, and accessible. And the problem lies in the accessibility. And so, for example, when people are engaged in the process of addiction recovery, why does a person get addicted to anything from, nicotine to all the different varieties of opiates and opioids and this and that, and the alcohol and running, anything which creates endorphins, which you get addicted to, or being violent. You can have sexual addictions. You can have all sorts of things. Anything that you do to a degree which is counterproductive for you, negative in its consequences for you, and you do it in spite of negative consequences, that's an addiction. So, cell phone addiction, television addiction, there's lots and lots of behaviors that people do, which they do because they're trying to deal with their anxiety. And so this is known in the medical world as self-medication. And so when you feel a little bit anxious, you will do something that makes you feel a bit better. That's the beginning part of self-medication. You feel some pain, you have a headache or something, you take an aspirin, that's self-medication. You have a cold, you go to the pharmacy, you pick up some cold medicine, that's self-medication. You have a dispute with a family member, you go to the bar and you take a drink, that's self-medication. You are, I know this from my parents. They were living through the Second World War. And so when bombs would go off, they would take a cigarette because it creates anxiety. You might get blown up. So that's self-medication. If, a child is in a family living room and there's a argument going on between the parents, then child will get caught up in the cell phone or the television. This is self-medication because of anxiety, you see. And so this is on a simple level. But when the circumstances get worse and your spiritual energy gets depleted by your self-medication activities, depending quite a bit on what they are. But you see, there's a lot of stuff which is anyway addictive. You see, like anything that gets passed around in the schools. That's where you find it first, in the school system. Or in your medicine cabinet at home, or somewhere like this. So we live in a society where there's lots of things readily available that are quite toxic and addictive, and you get caught up in that, and it's very, very difficult to get out of it. And then you see you don't know where all this begins because you arrive somehow in the middle of it and you don't know where it leads to. But essentially, it is said that when people get into addictions, it leads to insanity and or death of you or someone else, like as in the drunk driver will kill somebody, maybe themselves as well, maybe some passenger, some dog, some cat, whatever happens to be in the way. So there's a lot of chaotic situations which all come down to initial anxiety. And the anxiety is not something that you can come out of or come away from. You do something to make you feel a little less anxious, and then you pursue that in different ways. And to come out of it, the amount of work you have to do, psychological work, spiritual work, emotional work, relationship work, is a lifetime work. Well worth doing, but a lot of work. Very few people available to guide you through it. So you're kind of on your own, hope for the best, you know. And there are some who are quite expert, but few and far between. Most people may search for some guidance, some way to understand, but it's quite difficult to get that. So in the work that we do here in Brahma Kumaris Raj Yoga Center, so we learn about the soul, especially the soul. We learn about the Supreme Soul or God, because it is fundamentally the soul who is damaged, and fundamentally contact with God can heal that damage. And the soul itself is very, very subtle. The experiences that create anxiety are very gross. They are generally known as sin in religions, and nobody knows exactly what is meant by that, or what to do about it, or with it, or against it, or whatever, because there's not much resolution about it. But anyway, that's how it's called. And then you see there is very, very little information about God, right? People say, what is God? Where is God? Who is God? How do you know? Show me, prove it. That's very difficult because this is completely non-physical. And a person is very caught up in physical sense perception. This is how you know the world. This is how you experience whatever makes you anxious. Physical perception. Your mind is an instrument of perception which can perceive atmosphere, vibrations, intentions, these things which are much more subtle than actual physical, visible, tangible, audible things. And so you have access to gross and to subtle perception. But to perceive something which is beyond the gross and the subtle, this requires quite a lot of study, education, development, experimentation, and so on. And so we engage in that, those of us who are particularly interested in it. And you can take it pretty far. But you also have to be very stable, very solid, very psychologically grounded. And so if you start off with all sorts of disturbances, then it is highly recommended that you go very slowly, step by step, and deal with all of the different things that have happened through different therapeutic means to calm yourself down, to get yourself strong, and then gradually bring in the pure spiritual things which can amplify your stability and amplify your strength and enable you to get through some of the sort of eruptions that can take place in your psyche. You might suddenly find yourself catastrophically hysterical about something, right? Can happen, yes? No? No. I bet you, yes. Of course. And then at that time, you don't know what to do, you see. And so hopefully there is someone around, or sometimes it becomes a mental health facility who can help you to come down and to maybe help you with some drugs to calm down. Sleep therapy can be very, very good. There are many, many things. Some people, they benefit a lot from massage because every cell in your body is contaminated by the trauma that you experience in your soul. And so the repairing process is time consuming. And then you see, it's very important to hold yourself in very high regard to do these things. If you do not hold yourself in high regard, it mitigates against your doing this kind of work effectively and successfully. Because if you think of yourself as not valuable or not worth it, then you won't do it. But it's very important to receive a lot of messaging about your value, because part of your trauma has been that you were devalued, disempowered, you were reflected back to yourself as something that you're not. And you took that on, you see, it's quite complicated. And this affects you emotionally, mentally, spiritually, intellectually. And so all the areas need to be attended to and healed little by little, one by one, and with a lot of patience. And I think that one of the things that gets in the way of it is that we are impatient and we want to have everything fixed right here, right now, and thank you very much. Now. No, it takes time. And it is not always pleasant. So our relationship with unpleasant needs to be worked on so that we're able to be all right about something unpleasant. We need to be able to manage things that we discover about ourselves, what happened to us, what we did in reaction to that. All of these things are very toxic, very emotionally and mentally traumatic and damaging and distressing. And generally speaking, the people around you often make it worse. Occasionally make it better, but often make it worse. Probably who will make it better is your dog or your cat, who seem to have better understanding than the rest of the human race. But anyway, they're supposed to be dumb animals, but they're not that dumb, you know? So that really can be very good, but you need something more. And so I think the most important is to to say to yourself, okay, I get that there are things that are not okay, but I don't know what, I don't know how or where it came from or whatever, but I get that there's something wrong. So therefore I must do something about it. And self-medicating is not really a good solution. And so you get a lot of people trying to educate themselves in these matters because there's a lot of material available. A lot of people have researched this, have arrived at different ways to resolve different types of issues. There are many books, movies, and so on, which address these matters. And by exposing yourself to some of these things, it can help a lot. So I think I will stop there. I haven't given you any solution to anything, never mind. But maybe we can just have a few minutes of silence to just go inside with a very loving and compassionate eye on the self and really try to discern this beautiful being that you are, the soul, who is so intangible, but yet is there. So beautiful, but you can't see. It's so powerful, but you doubt that there's power. Go inside anyway and consider yourself to be this pure, powerful, blissful being of light. Remember an ancient time when you were complete, perfect, and that you knew that the best thing is that you are you. And you're embarking on a journey to return to that perfect state. Om Shanti.
Thank you. This is pure gold information. And I especially liked the part of getting to know yourself, but through the soul. I have tried to put a finger on what has caused pain in me. And as I described, cross-generational trauma, dysfunction, I was ripped away from my home country for migrating to the US at 4 or 5 years old, having to learn a new language, being bullied in school, and so on, dysfunction, losing my being separated from my father, fractured family, siblings who don't talk to each other to this day. Um, and but the part of going into yourself and trying to work on it on a soul level, using the meditation and knowledge to um, try to actually mend that. And you give me hope that I can return to a state where I don't feel so powerless, being dragged by the current, or too sensitive. Sometimes I feel I'm just too sensitive. I'm a big crybaby. Why do I feel these things so profoundly? Or yeah, just not giving up. I'm an escapist. Uh, Next week I'm going to Greece and France after that because I'm an escapist. And I try to just run away and I say, well, if I'm not going to be in a romantic relationship, screw it. I'm going to try and indulge myself and not try. And, there's nothing I can do about it. But actually now I think there'll be a whole lot of meditation going on in Greece or wherever I'm at because you were right about we can try to go to the beach and seek peace, but it's actually inside. So I can go to Greece and try to forget about things, but I'm taking it with me. It's in my soul. Yeah. Thank you.
They talk about fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. So you're a flyer awayer. And these are words that are used in the psychotherapeutic community to indicate that it is a response to heavy trauma. And you have been through one after another, after another, after another, after another, after another heavy trauma, which indicates that you are one powerful being because you're still here. Where was your original country?
Mexico.
Okay.
And I was born a poor, some poverty, unsanitary conditions, but my mother was the lady you spoke to who felt guilty, and you said you declared her not guilty here the other day, but she's the one that does real estate, and two of her daughters, my sisters, don't speak to her, but she's a great person, and she went through a lot, and she came out on the other side. She's a role model for me, but a lot of the things didn't happen to me directly, the trauma to me directly, but I still feel it, I still feel it.
Yeah. Well, you know that there is something called secondary trauma. A secondary trauma is something that, say, for example, first responders experience. They see what happened to someone and it traumatizes them. You hear about something that happened to someone, it traumatizes them. And, sometimes the powers that be will withhold information about stuff that's going on because they feel that this will be secondary trauma to people and that it's better to keep people ignorant, then expose them to that. But then you find out, and then you get your secondary trauma anyway, maybe tertiary trauma or something like this. So yeah, the state of the world at the moment is such that there is a large number of people who are going through really, really, really bad stuff. And if you think that, if you think of God as a being who is aware at all times of what's happening to all people, that is a being with an incredible amount of endurance, a very sensitive being. And he says that these are my children, and I feel what they're feeling. And in fact, what happens when you find out how to make a direct contact with that non-human being, that is what allows this energy to come to you directly. And I think of it as a resonance, which is able to heal you through you resonating with that resonance, which is very harmonious, very pure. And the trauma, mucks up your natural resonance. So a very important part of restoring yourself to your original essence is this resonance, which comes from that source. I mean, you may find a human being whose resonance is marginally better than yours at a particular moment in time and get something from close contact, but it's very temporary, and that person is not going to be able to sustain you for more than a couple of seconds. And so it's more tangible than God, because God is incorporeal. And yet, if you can bring yourself to your own incorporeal state, then you come on the same level. When you're on the same level, then the resonance can start to happen, and you can feel it very clearly and strongly. But our default state is materialist, gross, in dissonant condition, I see. And so the effort is called an effort, the effort to bring oneself to a much more subtle state that requires practice, thinking, experimenting, many things, but it's very reliable. And because a lot of information about it is there, it's possible for us to apply it. And this is really what this place is all about, you see. And so, yeah. Yes, there is hope. Of course there is hope. And anyway, you're eternal and immortal, so no matter what, you will survive. And then maybe the journey is rough, but, as you pass through stuff and you get towards a destination, which you can call resolution, and you look back and you say, yeah, it was all worth it. It was all worth it. And sometimes it happens. There is something I talk of as destiny or something like that. Destiny. Things happen, not for any good reason that you can think about, but they happen. And retrospectively, you can say that, if you hadn't been through all that, you wouldn't have been able to understand other people who do. You see, and then it makes you a healer, wounded healer, you see. This is not a bad piece of destiny. But if you just don't know anything, then you just remain ignorant and quite gross. So this extra sensitivity that you have can expose you to a great deal of pain, but it also enables you to have empathy greater than most other people. And in a sense, part of what we try to do, not only to restore ourselves to our original condition, but also to be somehow conduits for that energy to reach other people so that they can have it. And that is also a role to play. So it's all good. Doesn't look good, but it's all good. Yeah. Anyone else like to say something, share something? Everybody's been through hell, right? Yes. Welcome to the world. Yeah.
And if anyone have any questions, please leave it in the chat. So
Yes, we have something from Prakash over there in the back.
Om Shanti.
Om
I
Shanti.
had a question.
Can you
about,
turn it up because I can't hear?
Yeah, so the question is, it's about the habit of doing that negative thing, or like how to avoid, right? I just wanted you can elaborate on that. Like there is something like rewiring the thing which we are doing, but we do not want to do. And I want to rewire that action. And I got to, like, from meditation and different classes, learned that we need to bring that scene with us, like imagine that scene which is going to happen. Let's say I have anger and I know that if I get into conversation with so and so people with such and such situation, I will go and make like angry out of that. So if I see the scene beforehand, assume that, okay, if I enter that scene, this will be the output or outcome of that. So how do we do that, like in
I wouldn't do
meditation?
it. I wouldn't do it that way because that's too superficial for you. And it's all very hypothetical. I think it's better to look at yourself and say, okay, I observe that under certain circumstances, I get very angry. There are certain types of things, there are certain infractions that people do that trigger my anger. And so you'll need to identify the patterns, because this is all about patterns. It's not individual events. And you will also need to see when that pattern happened for the first time in your life, because this is very significant, because this is where your soul was initially bashed, with something. And so that this is the origin of the habit. And you can't really deal with the habit unless you go right to the root, right to the origin. And of course, you cannot go back 10 or 15 lives because it might be back there too. But you can see in this life what was the first time when you ever experienced anger, and about what, and in what context, and this sort of thing. Because these habits start with some kind of fairly traumatic thing. And you might even think that that fairly traumatic thing was not that bad, but it was that bad. one also has a tendency to minimize something which is quite big, because you'll compare it to something bigger and say, well, in comparison with that, it was small, therefore it was small. But your way of looking at things in comparison to other things is in many ways false, because you're using a lot of suppositions and preconceptions and retrospective and this type of thing. One has to go into, what did it feel like at that time? How did I feel? How did I think about my circumstance and situation? And that particular type of thing makes me angry. In this particular kind of situation, I get angry. Other things which make other people angry don't make me angry, right? Which means that it's connected to some initial thing, the strong thing that happened, you see. And so you have to go back to that. You're figuring out a scene of something which is likely to happen, that is likely to make you angry, doesn't really help you to get clear about what's triggering it, you see. It just shows you, okay, that's some sort of situation. But when you go back to the first cause of that, and the first experience of that's when you felt it raw, really strong. And that's where it really made a hole in your soul. And then all of these other things are consequences of that. So then you have to write down your history of these feelings. And then there may be other feelings, because generally speaking, the psychological community talks of anger as a reaction to hurt. You see, so then the first thing is probably not, you just got angry for no good reason. You got angry because somebody hurt you. And so then you have to look at the hurt. Then you have to look at why it hurt so much. Was it a philosophical, a physical, a psychological? What sort of hurt was this? And by whom? Under what circumstances? Did it offend your sense of justice? There's many, many elements of it that you need to analyze in order to get to the root. And that's why writing about it is very helpful. And you see that these kind of original causes are not just in isolation. There may be other things that produce not just only anger, which is a very, you can say, the emotion of anger comes from the inside pushing out, but there's other forms of anger which push in. And so a person can also direct their anger against themselves. That's very common. A lot of times the social system encourages the males to direct their anger outwards and the females to direct their anger inwards. That's part of the usual cultures. And then all of these things result in different diseases, which are called psychosomatic by some people. Otherwise, they're just called diseases, which come for no very good reason, but there's always a reason, you know. And so going back and analyzing back and back and back to the essence of it all gives you clarity that lets you know that all of these feelings that you have are there for a very good reason, And all these distortions of your soul are your way of handling different things, but they become fixed. And so what you're dealing with is not just you get the occasional outburst of anger at certain situations, but that there is something in you which responds in ways that don't correspond to who you really are, and they keep happening in various different configurations. And so what you want to is get to your original wound, and then you want to heal. And so you're going in and in and in until you get to the soul, because ultimately these are soul wounds. And so it's deeper than the psychological or the mental. It's very, very deep. And, if people are looking at it in a material scientific way, they won't go further than the brain. So I like the spiritual because it takes you way beyond the brain, the heart, not that ticker, but the essence of your being, and more and more people are onto this, and they're finding deeper and deeper. And yeah, this is what to do, in my opinion.
So there is a question online. How do you take people out from addiction of medication?
You must
When-
talk more loudly or turn yourself up, because I can't hear you.
How do you take people out from addiction of medication when they don't want or feel they can meditate? It's very difficult for them.
Do you say meditate or medicate?
They want to come out of medication.
By meditation.
Yeah, and they are not able to feel anything
Well,
in meditation.
Well, the thing is, if you look at the addiction recovery steps, meditation is the one before last. You have to do many, many, many before you get to that one. And it depends on the medication, doesn't it? I mean, the most addictive and damaging medication that is running around is the opioids, right? Fentanyl, yeah, which is approved by the FDA and. So your problem is the government or, the universities or, so the chemical stuff that has gone into your body, to take it out, you need to do a lot of things. On a physical level, you have to really clean your body. And so there are lots and lots of things that people do, detoxing and water and cleansing your liver, which is where all the poison goes. And then, you have to do a lot of psychological work, because, you have to understand that what was it that caused your pain in the first place, by which you got addicted? Was it an accident? Was it some psychological problem? Was it what? All the details you have to look at, and then consider what would be a good course of therapy, which has to be very personalized. You see, so I can't answer these questions except in a very general way, because I don't know the details. But meditation will come once you've taken care of all this other stuff on a physical, psychological, social, financial, mentality, your circumstances, your all sorts of things are contributory factors. And so everyone has to be looked at and dealt with one by one by one. And as you deal with it, to practice simple meditation is always good. But to get on really high level, intense meditation, that comes much, much, much later. Otherwise, you mess yourself up. So it's just, you have to go one step at a time. And if you do it any other way, it won't work. And so patience, perseverance, if you have good people around you who encourage you to keep going, that helps a lot, you know.
Thank you. I really appreciate the point or the signpost to look for the patterns, not just look for one incident at a time. And
No, it's all about patterns. All about patterns.
One last short one. What about if the pattern is a karma, or even, I don't know it. One time I told my mom, were we cursed because all these things, is it a curse? I mean, I don't believe, we don't believe in that, but we don't deal with curses and anything, but it almost felt like something like that.
Well, you can very rarely know unless somebody is busy doing curses and directing it at you and you happen to find out about it, and then, you know, then it's usually quite light. It can be heavy, but it's very deal withable. But the thing is, what I feel is the best way to look at it, it is what it is. It was what it was. It happened. I was in there. There's a big movie going on, and I was in this scene and playing this part, and it did this and this and this to me, to us. And I want to have some words to describe it in such a way that it is useful for me, right? And so was it a curse? Not useful to say it was a curse because, you know, I'm so fabulous and good that nobody would curse me unless they're really stupid. So we'll get rid of that one. I think that from what you're telling me, you have a great deal of personal strength, and these things are there to enable your strength to come forth, because it has a purpose which wouldn't happen unless something happened to let you know that there is a great strength in there. And if you haven't had these experiences, your strength doesn't have anything to hold on to grow into, to manifest from. And so it was needed by you, because you have something else to do later. Important. It's okay. No problem. So you say, so be it. Yes, let it be. You want to use me for this? Okay, I'm up for it. Thank you very much. Let's go. Right? If you think about it like that way, it's a very, very good for your recognition of yourself, validation of yourself. Because otherwise, if you think about it the other way, you disempower yourself along with everybody else trying to disempower you. So just you not disempowering yourself is enough to undo the disempowerment of all the other people. That's a reality that you discover eventually, and then so sooner the better. Yeah. Any thoughts? Yes, no, yes, little bit. Can I put you on the microphone? Because there's all these other people in the room who need the microphone to hear you. I mean, they're not in the room. They're on the television screen. Okay, you tell and I'll repeat it. How about that? Okay, no problem. Anybody else? Any thoughts? How about you? Any thoughts?
very powerful. I really connected with everything you shared,
Mm.
and you have a lot of understanding. And was able to put a lot of pieces together and just make sense of a lot of things in my life, things that I'm dealing with now. I'm healing through a lot of trauma, so just have the intention to go through that consciously and yeah,
Courageous.
yeah.
Yeah, you are.
I really resonated with the last thing you shared too, like
Mm.
turning what like our pain, what we go through, into like our life purpose, like what we are here to do.
Yes. That's very important. Very important to do that. And you can. You feel, yes, I can do this. That makes me have some meaning. Yes?
Yeah.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you.